We often think about hormones affecting our bodies, but what about our brains? It turns out they have a massive impact. Today, we're diving deep into how some key hormones can actually spark the growth of new neurons in the adult brain. Yeah, you heard that right. This process could totally change how we understand everything from memory to our moods. Let's get into it. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll cover the basics. What exactly is adult neurogenesis? Then, we're going to look at the complicated roles of estrogen and its partner, progesterone. After that, we'll talk about prolactin's really cool protective job. And finally, we'll tie it all together to see how this cellular action affects our actual thinking and feeling. So let's kick things off with a pretty fundamental concept. For decades, the prevailing wisdom in science was that once you're an adult, that's it. The brain cells you have are all you're ever going to get. But it turns out that's just not true. So this is the big question, right? Can we really, as adults, grow new neurons? The answer is a definitive yes. And honestly, understanding this is one of the most exciting frontiers in neuroscience today. Now, it's not happening all over the brain, but it is happening in some very specific, very powerful areas. This amazing process is called adult hippocampal neurogenesis, or AHN for short. In simple terms, it's the birth, growth, and integration of brand new neurons into your brain's existing wiring. And we're focusing on a key area here, the hippocampus. You can think of it as the brain's headquarters for learning, memory, and even navigating the world around you. Okay, take a look at this. We're zooming right into the brain to pinpoint where this cellular factory is. Deep inside the hippocampus, you've got this structure called the dentate gyrus. And nestled in there is a tiny layer called the subgranular zone, the SGZ. This is the spot. This is the neurogenic niche where these new adult neurons are born. So we're growing new brain cells. Big deal, right? Well, yeah, it's a huge deal. Because these new neurons are absolutely essential for some of our most important brain functions. HANN is critical for things like spatial learning and making new memories. And this is key, it's also deeply connected to how we regulate our mood. When this process gets disrupted, it's been linked to things like depression and anxiety. All right, let's bring our first key player onto the stage. Estrogen. We all know it's a major hormone in reproduction, but its influence reaches far, far into the brain. And when it comes to neurogenesis, its role is complex, powerful, and honestly, a little bit contradictory. So how does estrogen actually do anything in the brain? Well, it needs a place to dock, and those docking stations are called receptors. The brain is packed with them. You've got nuclear receptors like ER-alpha and ER-beta that are inside the cell and cause slower, more lasting changes. Then you have membrane receptors for super fast responses. And look where they're located. The hippocampus, hypothalamus, amygdala, all the critical hubs for memory, emotion, and hormone control. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. It is a massive oversimplification to just say estrogen boosts neurogenesis. The reality is so much more nuanced. How much estrogen, for how long, and even the context of the person's age and sex can completely flip the script. What helps in one scenario might actually hurt in another, or do nothing at all. And check this out. This table just lays it all out so clearly. Researchers looked at rats with their ovaries removed just to control for any natural hormones. What did they find? A short 2-hour burst of estrogen actually increased the birth of new neurons. But wait 48 hours and that effect completely reverses. It starts to inhibit it. Go even longer to 20 days and the effect just vanishes. It just goes to show how incredibly sensitive the system is to timing. Okay, so we've got estrogen, but you can't really talk about estrogen without talking about its partner in crime, progesterone. And its role in neurogenesis is this fascinating dance of working together and sometimes working against each other. And you guessed it, just like estrogen, progesterone has its own set of docking stations in the brain. It also has nuclear and membrane receptors, and they're spread out across really important regions like the hippocampus and even the frontal cortex, which tells you it can probably influence our more complex thoughts. And this is where things get really, really interesting. When progesterone is acting on its own, it can actually give neurogenesis a little boost. But when estrogen is also on the scene, progesterone often acts like a brake, stepping in to block or tone down estrogen's effects. This is a perfect example of what we call hormonal crosstalk, where the final outcome depends on the entire team of hormones working together. So we've seen the complicated relationship between estrogen and progesterone. Now let's bring in a third hormone that plays a totally different role. Meet prolactin. It's not so much a builder, but more of a bodyguard for the brain, shielding it from the damaging effects of stress.
This quote from the research really says it all. It says prolactin protects neurogenesis from stress hormones, what we call glucocorticoids, but it does this without messing with a normal everyday rate of cell growth when things are calm. It's like a highly specific, targeted defense system.
So the takeaway here is that prolactin is a huge factor in our resilience. Think of it as a hormonal buffer. It preserves our brain's ability to change and grow, what we call plasticity, even when we're facing down stress hormones like cortisol, which are notorious for shutting down neurogenesis. Okay, so we've been down in the weeds, looking at the cells and the chemicals. Now it's time to zoom out. Let's connect all these dots and see how these hormonal signals actually affect how we think, feel, and act. And believe it or not, the story doesn't end with just those 3 hormones. There are other key players involved. Take human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. We know it has receptors in the hippocampus, but its exact role is still a bit of a mystery. Then there's oxytocin, often called the love hormone, which is also involved, and we know its levels are closely tied to postpartum mood.
This right here, this is the whole chain of events from start to finish. It all begins with a hormonal shift, right? That change then either hits the gas or the brakes on neurogenesis. This in turn literally changes the wiring of the hippocampus. And the final outcome? A direct impact on our ability to learn, remember, and even manage our emotions.
And this is exactly why all of this matters so much. This isn't just some abstract biology lesson. When neurogenesis is impaired, we see a clear link to disorders like depression and anxiety. On the flip side, finding ways to enhance it could be a game changer for reversing age-related memory loss. It's a huge deal. So, all of this leaves us with one final, and maybe the most important question. If we know that these hormonal shifts can disrupt the brain's ability to grow and affect mood, how can we use that knowledge? How could this completely reshape the way we treat something like postpartum depression? The answers could revolutionize how we approach mental health care.